there have been a few, incidents which I don't really want to go into, because the point is not some, freaky conspiracy, but the point is getting this information out. And I'm very, very happy that so many people across the world are following it. It doesn't mean that they're going to go away, and it's quite possible that you're going to have another forum take over, because Bilderberg, again, it has become maybe a bit too popular for the likings of this shadowy elite. But certainly there are a lot of these organizations: Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, Council for Relations, Pinay Circle, Bohemian Grove, too many to name. But what is absolutely true, it's important that people become aware that there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory, that these things are real. And, and the etiquette of a conspiracy theory is just a way to discredit truthful information presented by investigative journalists. And again, in my book, that I'm seeing on the screen, The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, there's 120 pages of documents. And that's something that no one can disprove or challenge, because all these things come from within our sources in the group.
So, Daniel Estulin, you reference Nazis, which for whatever reason is very fascinating to really everybody on Earth. I mean, they had such egregious behavior, not controversial whether or not any of that happened, except to a handful of people somewhere possibly. But the fact that former Nazis are involved, or certainly were the predecessors of what we now call the Bilderberg Group. I had my own experience in boarding school in Switzerland, where one of the house fathers, Daniel, I think I've told you this before, one of the house fathers was a former SS officer from World War II, one of these guys that you would see in these old World War II films, dressed in white, skiing with machine guns. Very normal, neutral country. The house mother of the dorm called Juventus, which is where the young children went, she was Rommel's former nanny. This is neutral Switzerland. It's neutral. We're neutral.
What's the name of the school if it's not a secret?
It's the place where John Cary also went, turns out. It's called Institute Montana, and it's between Zurich and Lucerne.
Okay.
So, I know exactly all of my people, right?
I know exactly where it is.
The Secretary of State. So this is the sort of thing. And at the time, I'm 14. What do I know about this stuff? But this stuff actually really happens. I'm an eyewitness of that kind of integration into normal society. And this is really, I think, poignant when looking at the Bilderbergs and your research in your book, The True Story of the Bilderbergs, and they are meeting in the next number of days, and that kind of thinking. So what is the end game here if we were to look at it and say, what are they really looking to do? Be oracular for a moment. Look into your crystal ball. Rub your balls. Rub, rub, rub. What's going to happen next?
Let's just rub my ears.
That too.
I think I discuss it quite in depth in my new book, Trans-Evolution, The Coming Age of Human Deconstruction. The end goal, I think, generally speaking, is immortality. Now, you can look at it on a much smaller scale. You could say the end goal is to control the planet Earth. But, if you're smart and you kind of start extrapolating this, okay, so you're going to reduce the population. Good. Okay. So you killed off 5 billion people. You have 2 billion working for you. Then what? What are you going to do after that? And what are you going to do after that? What's the next step? So you're going to get to a point where you're only going to have the elite in power controlling the world. And then they're going to fight themselves. And you're going to have one guy left standing and say, I am the control of the planet Earth. Great. And now what? It doesn't end there. It can't. And I think the whole point is, again, immortality. And it all depends on how you understand immortality. Some people understand immortality. You cross yourself 30 times a day, you die, you go to heaven. Others, by this blind faith in God, you go to heaven. But for the elite, the concept of immortality has very little to do with flesh and bones and our physical appearance. The idea of immortality is someday, not very long from now, they're looking at this project, and it's called Russia 2045.
Yeah.
By 2045, you'll be able to upload or download your consciousness onto an avatar of your choosing. And if you hook that avatar, that consciousness, with the collective consciousness of humanity, you're going to have what's called a hive, mentality, okay, or hive mind. Well, we already have this hive mind, and it's called cloud. But instead of uploading files onto this cloud, you're going to be uploading your consciousness. So, I think the end result is, again, immortality. But you can also look at immortality from a different perspective. When I was with Castro back in 2010, Fidel Castro, I asked him about the meaning of immortality.
Yeah.
He started talking about Marx and Engels and Lenin, and I kind of stopped because he looked at me and he realized I wasn't, your typical Cuban hack. And he said, "Well, how do you, because I couldn't really say anything to him.
No.
So, I
He's
couldn't say,
Fidel
what the hell are you
Castro.
talking about? I couldn't say, Comandante, what the hell are you talking about? So he said to me, well, how do you understand immortality? And I said to him, for me, immortality is the survival of our species. And for us to survive as a species, there's going to come a time in the future, not long from now, where we're going to have to emigrate from the planet Earth and conquer galaxies. And that's immortality. So all of us, be it people or be it the super elite, we all have the idea, of living forever, except that they understand living forever differently how we understand living forever. But in any way you look at it, for the elite to live longer, the first thing that they need to do on the planet Earth is to indeed deindustrialize the world. That's why we have Detroit as a great example of this deindustrialization, zero growth, demand destruction. It's a poster child of what they want for us in the future, because if there's no progress, if there's no development, we're not going to be able to grow, and we're not going to improve our population density. So that's one of the objectives. But on the other hand,
here's the sort of general question that people say is population density. And the fact is these guys have all gotten rich and built massive empires because they have a customer base of 1 billion people. They sell cigarettes and Coca-Cola and automobiles. That's how they got rich. Why would they devastate their customer base all the way around the planet? Like, what's the upside there?
Yeah, they actually, that's not how they got rich. They got rich by manipulating markets, and also they got rich because they have this machine that you and I don't have, okay, that prints dollars and rubles and other currencies. But the point is that they don't need to sell trinkets to anybody. They don't need to sell cigarettes or shoes, because they already control 90% of the world's wealth. And that's absolutely undeniable. What they need is to reduce the world's population. But to reduce the world's population, they need to deindustrialize the world. And this is exactly what is being done right now, because they don't need more money. They need food and water, the natural resources that will allow them to live. And if we have a lot of people, 10, 15, 20 billion people on the planet, there's always going to be space for these people. Okay? There are people talking about you can put 6, 7 billion people in, the state of Texas. Okay, they're all going to be standing up and all going to be able to sleep. But that's not the point. The point is that we need food and water. And India, as a country of 1.3 billion people, is out of water. And if you have no water, you can't live. It's a key natural resource.
That's right. In fact, the farmers there, which now commit, I believe, about 140,000 of them a year, are committing suicide because Monsanto is leasing them the seeds, and then it takes extra fertilizer, it takes irrigation, all the stuff that they didn't need before to be able to afford, not to mention the pollen kills their sheep from the cotton and all the rest of this that goes on. But the water in one of the nuclear treaties under the Bush administration ceded much of the water rights of the aquifers to the Coca-Cola Corporation. So a local farmer who's just trying to grow a cotton ball has to irrigate with water coming out of Atlanta, Georgia. And all of this stuff makes it really impossible for... So I guess having a population where it's now 7 billion and it's supposed to go up to 12 billion in the next number of years, where we do have inhospitable air and water, melting glaciers, and even the 1% know at the end of the day that skin cancer isn't something they can avoid either, it kind of makes sense. You've got to get rid of the problem before it gets to the point where even they can't pay to find a way out.
Well, if you kind of there's a new term in Wall Street. It's called water barons, not money barons, but water barons. And familiar mega banks and investing powerhouses such as Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, UBS, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Barclays, Blackstone Group, Alliance from Germany, Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. They're consolidating the control over water. And you look at Argentina, for example, at Patagonia.
Yeah.
And most of that water has been bought up by foreign, billionaires. And it's a very disturbing trend because, again, if you have no water, there's no survival on the planet. So you have all these billionaires controlling or beginning to control totally
To
control
your
water
point,
supply.
Nestle, the Nestle Corporation, as we say here in America, and you're in Madrid, Spain, Nestle makes the very best chocolate. They now own a full third of Earth's water supply. That means the Swiss, of a population of what are they, 7 million, maybe 8, own a third of Earth's water supply, a little island in the middle of Europe. I mean, this
Well,
is stuff that's just mind-boggling.
you look at a British billionaire Lewis, and he owns huge swaths of land in Argentina, and all the key water supplies and lakes. There's one lake, Lake Escondido, and he's the owner of that lake. And again, it's governments around the world who are being pushed back, pushed to the brink by International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and if that doesn't work, by governments, and if that doesn't work, as John Perkins talked about in the economic hitmen and jackals, you have the jackals and then you have the governments, and if that doesn't work, as in the case with Saddam Hussein, you have the army come in, and that's when it's game, set, and match, and they'll take over whatever natural resources they want. Except that today, that's one of the things that Bilderberg will be discussing this year, exactly what to do about Russia's and China's growing might, both economic and military.
So we look at Ukraine, we look at China, we look at Taiwan, we look at Vietnam, which is going to be probably the new China in the factory sense soon enough anyway. What do the Bilderbergs want out of all of this? We know what Obama says we're supposed to want, but what do these guys want behind the scenes? These are leaders from not only the United States, but from all over Europe, from Canada, from everywhere. What do these guys, what do you think they want here?
When we look at politics, we look at politics from two perspectives: national politics or foreign policy. But these policies, which are put forward, I guess you would say, by presidents and prime ministers and their cabinets around the world, have very little importance on world politics themselves. Because above national and foreign, you have another set of policies, which is global politics, and that's run from behind the scenes by the shadow masters. These are the same people who put Obama or whoever is going to replace him, in the next presidential elections of the United States. These are the people who spend small, pibs of Canadian or French or German budgets to put their chancellor or prime minister in place. But these people are nobodies. They have very little control, and the control is obviously done on the global stage, on the global political level. Why am I talking about this? Because when you talk about Bangkok, if you're talking about Vietnam, China, the destruction of the Soviet Union, the destruction of Yugoslavia, we can talk about Detroit, we can talk about what's happening in the United States, the uprisings in Ukraine, or the civil war in Ukraine. You have a verge of civil war in Venezuela. Anywhere in the world, you have to understand that this is all part of this global operation. And the global operation, needless to say, needs conflict, because you make money by selling guns and butter to both sides always in any conflict, on the one hand, and also it gives any conflict, especially in situations such as the Ukraine, where they had a very corrupt president who replaced another extremely corrupt president, who replaced another extremely corrupt president. We can go back to the end of the Soviet Union back in 1991. But the fact is that, as Reagan used to say, this guy that we have right now is our corrupt president, or our assassin, or our drug pusher, and not theirs. So anywhere you look on the world stage, needless to say, Ukraine is the latest example, except that, again, they miscalculated, because Putin brilliantly, in 1 week's time, they won the referendum in Crimea, which is a key area of the Black Sea, and obviously is now back into the Russian fold. And West was stunned. They still can't understand that in a span of a couple of weeks, without any bloodshed, something like this could happen. And 96% of the populace voted, to join Russia. And they talk about, illegal or unfair elections. I don't know what they're talking about.
So to wrap this up, as we talk to Daniel Estulin, again, he is the multi-award-winning author, The True Story of the Bilderbergs, which you're seeing represented here on the screen, probably the best research book of who these guys are. Guys and gals, by the way. It is not an all-boys club, though once upon a time it certainly was more heavily favoring men, but it's everybody, including Hillary Clinton, the whole soup, cat, and Pete's, all the family, all the kids in one happy spot. What can we, the mammals crawling about down here powerlessly, hunting and foraging for the nuts and berries of hope and future, hope, like Obama, hope. What the hell can we do? Can we do?
I think, first of all, it's very important for people to understand that this is real. It's important to understand who these people are. It's important to recognize their names and their faces. So, some of the individuals who have attended Bilderberg over the years, the Kissingers and the Brzezinski and the Rockefellers, the rock stars of American politics, we know who they are. But Bilderberg is a meeting, an informal meeting of 130 individuals who meet annually. It's important to understand that a lot of these individuals, they slither in and out of, public and private positions. One day they could be a commissioner for, economic affairs in Europe, and the next thing is representing a very important bank in Ireland. We have to know who these people are. And when you see them, you know immediately that these people are up to no good. And you have to understand that what's actually being developed at these meetings, whether we're talking about technologies, all of these things being developed, they're not being developed or justified or created on a whim. They're being written and specifically designed, to give governments around the world, as we talked about how this process of consensus works, to give governments and European commissions and other institutions carte blanche authority over the people during this chaos and confusion of the period that they themselves call the age of transition, meaning transition to a planetary civilization. Okay, and people have to understand that the future Bin Ladens, the Gaddafis, the Putins, the whoever, they're not the enemy. They never were the enemy. We, the people, are the enemy. And you see this, whether you're at the airports or the border crossings, street corners, we, the people, are the enemy of this, globalized supranational elite, because there are 7 billion people on the planet, and there's very few of them. And once we understand that this is real, we can start working to actually stop it. But we have to admit that this conspiracy exists.
Right. And likewise, once that is understood, there isn't likely, at least on U.S. soil, to suddenly be a platform where this can be openly and freely discussed. You're certainly not going to have Anderson Cooper getting off of Twitter and gossiping about testicles and earrings and suddenly talking about this stuff. So we're in this place where the public voice, the platform, the way that we would reach each other, internet is being privatized, as we know, major moves. The former guy, one of the chiefs of the cable companies, is now in charge of the FCC and thinks the best idea is to simply charge everybody and firewall everyone from being able to move around freely on the internet. So this very instrument we're using right now, in a sense, can go away as well, can be blocked, can be deleted. So even with the awareness, which would be the best case scenario, how the hell, not that you have the answer, Daniel, because it seems somewhat insurmountable, but what do we do next? How do we get the bullhorn? How do we achieve the sort of power that it would take? And I'm wondering, I'm just going to throw out an idea here. High fructose corn syrup, you're in Europe. This stuff is not very popular there, am I right?
No.
Exactly. And likewise here, not everyone knows mechanically or medically or other reasons why, but they just know it's somehow bad for the human body. So it only took about 10 to 15% of us to question high fructose corn syrup, and now Post has pulled it out of their Raisin Bran. It's starting to disappear from a lot of things because only 10 to 15% of us questioning it and not purchasing it was enough for corporations to stop pushing it forward. I wonder if a small enough group of us who all have this awareness get together, if that can also be a tipping point.
It might be, but I don't think so, because again, if you kind of listen to what Cass Sustin said recently, and he mentioned this in his book about the idea of infiltrating organizations and actually breaking them up from within, it's very difficult to do because again, governments are very good at infiltrating governments, any government in the world, and making sure that you have a big group and they separate into small groups. And a great example of that in the United States is Occupy Wall Street movement, how that has been usurped.
Yeah.
But I think, this whole thing about internet being taken over, I think that's overblown. They don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense because, through social media, they can literally see what everyone does in real time. And there's no better
Voluntarily,
way.
we volunteer the porn that we watch. We volunteer our secret passions, our political ideologies. We throw it on Facebook. In fact, they
That's
even offer a
Stassi's
poll and we answer it willingly.
It's Stassi's wet dream come true, absolutely. So if you actually somehow eliminate that freedom of the internet and start charging for it, you're losing a very important element of control, because you can control from high up 7 billion people doing things simultaneously through social media. There's no better way to do this. And I think we talked about this on, the last time I was on, when we were discussing trans evolution, how Twitter isn't just Twitter. It's not just a 140 character tweet, but it has 31 to 34 pieces of information about you. You can talk about, be it Facebook or any other social media, how all that information, when you actually put it together and you have enough engines out there and enough ways that the governments can do this, that they can see what everyone does in real time. And that's an amazing control tool, which you can actually use to adjust the propaganda campaigns around the world. And so I don't see why they would want to limit it, because again, yes, it's absolutely true. Our interview in 1 second after it's done, goes viral, and somebody in Japan can download it, and in Australia, and pass it on to their girlfriend in Argentina, and they to somebody they know in Seattle, Washington. It, went once over the entire world in 1 second. But at the same time, there's just so much trash out there, that people most of the time don't know what's real and what's not. So if you can actually get all that information out and you can control and you can watch what people do, there's no reason for them to actually reduce the internet freedom, because it's, on the one hand, it's a liberating experience, because as I said before, if you go back thousands of years ago, the people who control knowledge, the high priests, and you look at it today, what was done in secret societies on a very small, scale, little groups working together underground, passing information from one generation to the next over thousands and thousands of years. And now you have a Koya Indian sitting in a tree in the middle of an Amazon rainforest, with the internet connection, and Google. He has access to everything out there. Okay, so that's a liberating experience. But on the other hand, okay, it gives the people who control the world the ability to see what is being done globally, via through 7 billion people. And that's something that they can't afford to lose, because if they do, it's like being blinded and suddenly you can't see what everybody does. So I don't see that happening, although people are talking about this.
Daniel Estulin, I want to thank you as always. You are a glass of cool water in a sea of parched air and possibility. Though the information is grim, it's critical. And it's great food for thought. In fact, it's such an abundant meal that you end up leaving bloated, which I think was part of your last book. A lot of people were really overwhelmed at the thought about this trans-evolution, this notion of immortality that these handful of people, and we know throughout history, cryogenesis has been very popular. When you're very rich, you have your head severed and your brain frozen, allegedly to be thawed out someday so that wonderful mind of yours can reestablish and conquer. Hardly science fiction, science fact. And as we look forward, this more and more likely is going to be the future, as you point out.
People, absolutely. It's, the technology has gone way beyond what Disney planned for himself when he died. I can't remember when he died. But certainly, technology is light years ahead of anything that we see out there today. And the fact is that if you go back to Hollywood films back in the 1980s and the 1990s, sci-fi films, and you compare the technology that's out there today, and then you kind of, look at what sci-fi films are offering today, and you kind of extrapolate it into the future, just think how far ahead and advanced the humanity will be from, about 10 years into the future.
Yeah, great example. Star Trek, the original, Captain Kirk, putting it was a salt shaker as a prop, but Bones McCoy was able to scan a body. There was a bed where there was a monitor up behind where you could watch the bodily functions. All that is normal today. All that is absolutely, it's a tricorder in a sense, now exists. And
We
so,
talk,
you know, a lot of what we use today, this thing, my iPhone, it's remainder military technology. But after they've advanced so far, then you and I get the scraps.
if you go back to, I saw an old photograph, 1957 photograph of the first computer, and that thing was as big as a building. And if you look at a smartphone today, it is more powerful than anything that NASA had 50 years ago. So I can't wait to see what the world is going to be like in the next 10 to 15 years, and imagine 100 years from now.
Yes. And according to your prognostications of pandemic whoopee, it's going to be a tight ship, or there's going to be plenty of legroom. We'll find out what that cabin looks like, right?
Can I give out my
Please.
my Twitter?
Yeah.
It's people can follow me on my Twitter account. It's at Estulin Daniel.
Estulin Daniel, one word, Estulin.
Lin.
Estulin Daniel. That's Twitter. We'll make sure we post that. Thank you so much, Daniel. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate your 50,000 watts of intelligence bursting through the capped ceiling of imagination, and we'll look forward to having you back on again shortly.
Cary, it's wonderful to be on your show again. Take care.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.